This is K.M. Weiland, and you are listening to the 235th episode of the Helping Writers Become Authors podcast. I'm excited to announce that I've just started work on a new project. Several of you have asked that I create worksheets, workbooks, and even software as a guide for following the methods I talk about in my two books, Outlining Your Novel and Structuring Your Novel. I'm currently in the process of gathering my thoughts with the goal of creating workbooks for each of the books. I may eventually look into a simple software interface as well, but for now, the workbooks are definitely a go. I have a busy year ahead with the late summer release of the Writer's Digest Annotated Classic Jane Eyre, but I'm hoping to be able to release both of the workbooks before the year is out as well. If you have any ideas about how I can make the workbooks as accessible and useful to you as possible, please don't hesitate to let me know. You can contact me through my site at helpingwritersbecomeauthors.com. The latest post in the video series on my blog is, Are You Revealing Your Story's Stakes at the Right Moment? It talks about the perfect place to reveal your story's stakes and why it's so important to drive them home to readers. And now I hope you enjoyed this week's podcast entitled Creating Stunning Character Arcs, Part 5, The Characteristic Moment. First impressions do count, and your protagonist's characteristic moment is his first chance to impress your readers. Now that we've got the basic theory of character arc out of the way and figured out how to set up your protagonist's inner conflict via the lie he believes, the thing he wants and the thing he needs, and the ghost, we're ready to officially begin writing our character's story. The structure of character arc begins with the characteristic moment. Throughout the rest of this series, we'll be aligning the major moments in the character arc with the major structural plot points. If you're unfamiliar with the basics of story structure, you may find my book, Structuring Your Novel, Essential Keys for Writing an Outstanding Story, to be a helpful foundation for what we'll be discussing in the rest of this series. The characteristic moment and the normal world, which we'll discuss next week, align with the hook. It shows up the moment your protagonist does, presumably in the first chapter. In real life, people may be cautioned against making snap decisions about others based on first impressions, but face it, we do. And we're even less likely to feel conscientious about our judgments when reading fiction. We've just opened a book. We've never read this author before. We have no idea whether it's going to live up to the awesome back cover blurb and prove worthy of our time. Then here comes the protagonist prancing on stage. What's he doing? What's his personality? Does he seem like someone we're going to end up liking? Does he seem interesting? If not, we're already halfway to closing the book. In short, a failed characteristic moment can very likely mean a failed story. The characteristic moment has to accomplish several tasks. It has to introduce your protagonist, probably reveal the protagonist's name, indicate your protagonist's gender, age, nationality, and possibly his occupation, indicate important physical characteristics, indicate his role in the story, i.e. that he is the protagonist, demonstrate the prevailing aspect of his personality, hook readers' sympathy and or their interest, show the protagonist's scene goal, indicate the protagonist's story goal, demonstrate or at least hint at the protagonist's lie, and influence the plot, preferably directly, but at the very least in a way that foreshadows later events. This is quite a hefty checklist for the first scene of your story, especially when you add in related structural requirements. So it's no wonder beginnings are so tough. The characteristic moment is a work of art. We can't be content to open with our character doing any old thing. we have to select an event that will make the protagonist appealing to readers, introduce both his strengths and his weaknesses, and build the plot. But even distilled down to these three aspects, the characteristic moment is still tricky. We need to indicate the character's lack, the problems in his life caused by the lie, as soon as possible. But we don't want to focus too heavily on the character's negative aspects right away. In writing screenplays that sell, Michael Hauge reinforces you must establish identification with your hero before revealing major flaws that could reduce sympathy. If your character's arc is all about him growing into courage, honesty, and selflessness, then he's gonna have to start out as less than brave, truthful, or generous. But if we tried to open most stories with a selfish, cowardly liar, most readers probably wouldn't be hooked. And yet, what other kind of characteristic moment suggests itself for such a character? We have to indicate his problems so we can prove how he's changed by the end of the story, right? Absolutely. But our foremost job is hooking readers. If you intend your character to be generally likable, despite his faults, start with that. What do you like about him? What scene can you craft to highlight that? He doesn't even have to be nice in this scene. He just has to be interesting. Ron Clement in John Musker's Treasure Planet opens with its rebellious teenage protagonist demonstrating his skills and courage aboard his Solar Surfer. John Turtletub's The Kid opens with its protagonist acting like a complete jerk, but his snide comments are so nasty and accurate that viewers can't look away. Think big. If your character's chief virtue is his compassion, don't settle for having him pat a stray dog. Have him run into NYC traffic just across the street and see why a little girl is crying. If he's known for his bravado, don't just have him strut down the street. Have him pick a fight with 5 toughs and win, or at least nearly win. Optimally, you'll be able to work your character's lie right into the characteristic moment, but sometimes doing so just won't be possible. We can only keep so many balls in the air while still maintaining logic within the plot. In these instances, you may have to postpone the introduction of the lie until you've crossed off your list a few of your beginning's other requirements. But you're always going to want to introduce the lie as quickly as possible. The lie frames your character arc and thus your entire story. Readers need to see proof of your character's weakness so they'll understand what he has to overcome. Your protagonist's characteristic moment could manifest as a vow, as a child, to be like his father and grow up to fight them all, and then as an adult, a cocky display on his way to being announced heir to the throne, which illustrates key personality traits, the effects of the lie, and the thing he wants more, or the story goal, as in Thor. Or a lonely moment banned from the family circle spent reading, and then a refusal to submit to her cousin's unjust cruelty, which illustrates both the ghost and key personality traits, as in Jane Eyre. Or an on-the-job demonstration of his cranky inability to live in the modern world and his dislike of kids, which illustrates key personality traits, the lie, and the thing he wants most, as in Jurassic Park. Or a distrust of his mother's promises and a fearful attitude toward everything, especially pigs, which illustrates the lie, the thing he wants, and the personal weaknesses he will have to overcome. Or a montage showing him being lovingly played with by Andy, and then, once he's awake, a calm and organized leadership of the other toys, which illustrates the thing he wants most and key personality traits, as in Toy Story. or a cynical but obviously intelligent response to babysitting a reporter, which illustrates the ghost and key personality traits, as in Three Kings. Or a grudging retreat from false accusations, which illustrates the lie and the thing he wants most, as in Green Street Hooligans. Or a hilariously neurotic morning routine, which illustrates the thing he wants most and key personality traits, as in What About Bob? You'll note that some characteristic moments are double-sided. Thor's characteristic moment takes place in a two-part series of scenes, the first of which is a part of a prologue and shows him as a child. Just as with Treasure Planet, which also starts with a childhood prologue, the character has to be reestablished in his true normal as an adult. In Jane Eyre and Toy Story, we see how we can use not just a single characteristic moment, but several to prove different aspects of our characters. Jane shows us two sides of her personality. First, her lonely but contented introversion, and then her defiant and spirited refusal to be trampled upon. Because of the constraints of Toy Story's logic, in which the toys must be passive and still when humans are present, Woody's love for Andy is primarily shown through Andy's love for him. This is the most important aspect of the story, but we're also then given a prime example of Woody's able leadership of the other toys once he wakes up in Andy's absence. So consider some further examples of the characteristic moment. A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. Scrooge is introduced in a lengthy telling segment, which is not recommended for modern books, in which the author flat out tells readers certain important facts about Scrooge's miserliness and general lack of the milk of human kindness. By the time we reach Scrooge's first dramatized scene, we already have a pretty clear picture of his personality. That picture is further emphasized when he enters his frigid counting house, heated by a very small fire and his employee Bob Cratchit's single coal, and proceeds to reject his nephew's kind-hearted Christmas invitation by telling him precisely what he thinks of the holiday and its goodwill toward men. Readers immediately get a sense of Scrooge's crabby personality, his incisive wit, his lie, which he basically spells out, and his story goal of making as much money as possible. Cars, directed by John Lasseter. Lightning McQueen's intro comes by way of his verbalized pre-race routine in which he claims, "I am speed," and "I eat losers for breakfast." He then demonstrates his sizable skill, as well as his disdain for his pit crew, in the lengthy race segment that opens the movie. Viewers are given further info via the commentators, who reinforce Lightning's lie by revealing he's already fired 3 pit crew chiefs because he says he likes working alone. In this extended opening, viewers learn all they need to know about Lightning, his good points, his racing skills, his lie, and the thing he wants most, the Piston Cup. Ask yourself the following questions about your characteristic moment. 1. What important personality trait, virtue, or skill best sums up your protagonist? 2. How can you dramatize this trait to its fullest extent? 3. How can you dramatize this trait in a way that also introduces the plot? 4. How can you demonstrate your protagonist's belief in his lie? 5. Can you reveal or hint at his ghost? 6. How can you use this scene to reveal your character's overall story goal, the thing he wants most? 7. Does your protagonist's pursuit of both the story goal and the scene goal meet with an obvious obstacle, that is conflict? 8. How can you share important details about your protagonist, name, age, physical appearance, quickly and unobtrusively? Don't settle for anything less than spectacular for your characteristic moment. This is your opportunity to create a fun and effective scene that will introduce readers to your character in a way they'll never forget and won't be able to look away from. Thank you for listening to the Wordplay Podcast. To read a transcript of this episode, you can visit my website at helpingwritersbecomeauthors.com. And be sure to check back again next week.